So another one of my favorite things that I love to do in After Effects has to do with these. These are known as blending modes. Sometimes they call them ink modes, color modes, depends on the software. But all Photoshop and all these programs, even Premiere, has this type of drop down. This happens to have more choices, like ways of cutting holes and things and stuff like that. But these are really, really fantastic. It's probably my #1 favorite thing about After Effects. So let me give you an example of how this works to kind of jazz things up. You could put texture on here, or crackling film, or burning out film, or whatever, lay it on top of here. It would be its own layer. Change this and it'll make it look really cool. It'll blend it in. Basically, there are ways of blending things in a more subtle and interesting way than just turning down the opacity. Turning down the opacity of everything, when you hit T and turn down the opacity of stuff, a lot of times it just makes it cloudy and muddy and nothing's really distinct. So these are ways of blending things which keeps most of the cool, colorful properties of them. So let me undo that. And I'm going to just bring something in and lay it on top of this and show you some cool things that ink modes will look like. But here, if you roll over it, it says blending modes. Okay, I'm going to bring in a file that I like, totally misspelled, called Canvas. And what it is it's some canvas I took pictures of a long time ago. And I've always liked it because it has a lot of texture. So let's see if I can get that to blend in some cool ways. Here it is, Canvas. It's a Photoshop document, which is nice. In the old days in After Effects, you couldn't use Photoshop documents very well. You had to go in and make it a JPEG or a TIFF or something like that. So here's Canvas. I'm going to bring it in and set it down right on top of the clowns here. Maybe I'll hit S for scale and make sure it's kind of a decent size and things like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these, blending modes. I'm going to roll over it and change it and see if I can get it to blend in with the clown thing underneath, which it is now. It's actually blending in a little bit into the text too. So instead of just clicking through all of these, which would take forever, there's a shortcut that I like. What you do is you hit Shift and plus or minus to scroll through them all, and you can see what they look like. Like that one looks really cool. That's multiply. See the names down here? You can see how it's changing right here. Let me change it again. I'll hit Shift, plus, plus. Some of them don't do much. Some of them do a lot, like that. Linear burn looks awesome. So I'm just going to scroll through these really quick. You want to give it just a second to update. You can see the little blue update bar underneath the window there. Some of these look really cool. What I do is when I see one I like, I just kind of make a quick note of it and write it down, because sometimes you get glorious, glorious effects out of this. You can also copy the clowns again, the text, and you can actually keep one that's got a lot of blue in it and one that's more brown or gray. So I'm kind of running through them all real quick. One I like is Multiply. I think Multiply looks pretty good. So I might put this canvas on there. I might also hit T for transparency or opacity and turn it down so that it's sort of like just barely there, subtly, right? There's a lot of other things you could do. You could add in other things into this too. Another thing I could do is I can then try to put this under here and have the clowns actually have a different kind of color mode on them too. I could turn this into like an overlay or something so that the clowns will actually blend in. Let's try both of them as an overlay here. So you might need to do both layers. See that? So that's kind of interesting. I'm getting some pretty cool stuff here. Let me change this one a lot and see what happens. I'm going to do Shift, plus, plus, plus. I really love some of the effects I'm getting here. Look at how the colors are starting to pop. So I've kind of reversed the order now so that the clowns is on top and the canvas is underneath, and then I'm blending the clowns into what's underneath it. So there's all sorts of cool effects you can get here if you will just take the time to click through all of these blending modes in After Effects. Do the same thing in Photoshop, although if you can do them here, you probably don't need to do them there. I have a ton of fun with this. Every time I get something that's surprising and beautiful, I get so excited. So, if I like that right here, I could hit play. Renders pretty quickly, so that's kind of what I'm getting so far. Clowns on that creepy canvas. I can have some blood splatters show up if I want to make it into a horror movie, something like that. So far we've covered putting in a track mat, which was pretty cool. and cutting the GIF underneath out using the text. So there's several ways we did that. Just tinker around with it till you get what you want. The other thing that I love, that's one of my favorite things here, is overlay and using color modes like blending modes, things like that to create a cool looking effect. The other thing we did was we made some shapes here, and you can either make a kind of a new layer, and then when you click the shape, you will have like a color here that you can play with, and these can all be animated. So, you know, I could come in here, I could use all different kinds of shapes are under here actually. You know, there's a star, for example. I could draw this star, and then I could do, while I'm holding it, I can do arrows up to make more spikes or less spikes. So let's make a whole bunch of spikes. And then I can actually, once I have that shape completed, I can stick that shape in here. And now it's on its own layer. So once again, I might want to try to use some of these blending modes on it too. So I'm going to go through those. So while you make these shapes, I'm doing, once again, shift plus or minus. Once you do these shapes, see, there's some cool things happening there. If you look carefully, you can really find some nice stuff. I like that one a lot. That's add. I'm adding colors, see? I'm getting some more subtle versions of that aren't so bright. That one's pretty cool looking. So all of these make a really interesting bunch of things you can do. The shapes can also be animated. That's one thing I really like about them. This can then be animated around. I've got the shape layer here. It's got all of these different things I can change. Anytime you see a stopwatch, you know that it can be changed. Like here's how many stars and points it has. I can actually animate that. So I can turn up the stars, see that? I can turn up the points. I can animate its position. So, you know, it'd be good if I turn all of these on just to show you what can be done with them. So those are all kind of turned on now, so I have a keyframe. Let's go a little later and let's change it so that you actually see some things going on here. Let's move it across here. So now I have it going from here to here. Also, let's rotate it 3 times. Also, maybe we change the inner radius to make it a little smaller. And also we can change the outer radius to make that bigger. That's kind of interesting. Roundness we can change too. See how it's rounding out the spikes? So you just got to get in and play and try everything out. That looks more like a weird flower, so I like that a lot. I'm going to try that out. So now I have all these keyframes. The other thing I might do is select them all with a marquee and then right click it and do keyframe assistant easy ease so that all of these are made into a little more chilled. They won't be so stiff when they hit their closing spots. So here we go. This is a nice vectory shape, so it shouldn't take hardly any RAM to render. So here it's going to move across and change rather dramatically as it moves across. That's all with just a few keyframes in a few seconds. And look at the art of Saul Bass, who did a whole bunch of titles for things like James Bond. He did a whole bunch of Hitchcock titles that are pretty famous. So go look at the work of Saul Bass if you want this type of titling going on. Simple shapes, moving around, more of a vector look. Also, you'll see it at the opening credits. If you look up opening credits of Catch Me If You Can and opening credits of Fabulous Mr. Fox, they all have this particular style of very kind of simple shapes moving. It's awesome. It's pretty perfect for After Effects. It's 2D. It's a lot of good things you could do with it. So we have a bunch of interesting things going on. Maybe I don't like the darkness of this. I could also change the color to more of a yellow color just by clicking on the shape controls up here on the top. Kind of yellowish orange here, mustard color. And let's go through one more time through our color, our blending modes here. I really like that. That looks kind of neat. I'm starting to get some ugly colors in there, but you know, I could go in and change things if I want to. So the other thing I might want to do is just duplicate this whole thing, all of my clowns by hitting Command D, and then I can change them again to different kinds of colors that overlay. So I'm doing more blending again to try to maybe keep some of the colors in there. So you can do a lot of really interesting things with these. Get 2 layers selected and then hit Shift and plus. So I'm starting to see some really weird things showing up here that I like a lot. That one's quite beautiful there. That's Luminosity. This is kind of where we get into more of an experimental filmmaking technique. At the Art Institute where I studied, School of the Art Institute of Chicago, a lot of times you just play. They called it jouer. Fun. They didn't call it that. I called it that. That's what Picasso called it. You just play and see what happens. You might get some really cool effects. I really kind of like that one there, but I might hit T for transparency and turn both of these layers down a little bit. So now it's kind of blending in. I'm keeping a little bit more of my color. This is what it looks like when it's off. So it's very subtle, but it's there. It's allowing me to read it a little better. Ultimately, it's probably important that things are read. If you're making a title or a logo, make sure people can read it. So I'm getting into this, having a lot of fun, playing around with my blending modes.